You're standing in a scorched patch of grassland roughly 1.8 million years ago, holding a dead animal you didn't kill, watching a wildfire retreat toward the horizon like it's late for something. You're hungry. You're always hungry. Everyone around you is always hungry, all the time, forever, because that's just the baseline setting of being alive right now. And then you notice something. The ground near the fire's edge is littered with small, scorched carcasses, tubers, seeds, the collateral damage of a blaze that didn't care what it destroyed. You pick one up, it's warm. It doesn't smell like rot. On a whim, mostly boredom, partly desperation, you eat it. This is roughly the most consequential accident in the history of your species, and you did it because you were bored and a fire happened to be nearby, which is basically the same energy as doomscrolling at 1 a.m. because you're too tired to get up and too awake to sleep. You didn't set out to invent cooking. Nobody sat down with a business plan. There was no whiteboard. This is closer to how you ended up with a food delivery app open on your phone at 2 a.m. ordering mozzarella sticks. You don't even want that badly. It wasn't a decision, it was a series of low-effort defaults that snowballed into a lifestyle. By the end of this video, you're going to understand how a scavenged, half-charred squirrel carcass connects directly to your jawline, your gut bacteria, your brain size, a 300,000-year-old cave in South Africa, and the extremely petty academic feud that's still going on right now between anthropologists who cannot agree on when humans figured out fire was for more than just staying warm and looking cool. And here's the thing nobody tells you in school. Cooking barely gets covered in history class because history class is obsessed with kings and wars and treaties, all of which required people who were crucially not starving to death, which was only possible because someone at some point figured out that heat does something magical to food that raw chewing cannot replicate. You've spent your whole life assuming cooking is a skill like knitting or parallel parking. It's not. It's closer to an evolutionary event, one that rewired your skull, shrank your gut, and gave you enough spare biological budget to eventually invent smartphones, existential dread, and the concept of a quick 30-minute meal that always somehow takes 90 minutes. So let's actually go back and figure out how this happened because it's messier, weirder, and dumber than you'd expect in the best possible way. Chapter 1 is the raw food problem, and it is genuinely disgusting once you sit with it. Before cooking, your ancestors, specifically early Homo species around 2 million years ago, were eating raw meat and raw plants. And raw food is, biologically speaking, a nightmare to process. Chimpanzees today spend around 6 hours a day just chewing. Because raw food is tough, fibrous, and calorically stingy, you burn a huge chunk of energy just breaking it down, and your gut has to be enormous to extract anything useful from it, like a car with terrible gas mileage that also needs a bigger, heavier engine just to move it all. Cooking changes the math entirely. Heat breaks down connective tissue in meat and gelatinizes starch in plants, which means your body suddenly gets way more calories per bite for way less chewing and way less gut real estate. Harvard primatologist Richard Wrangham built an entire, genuinely controversial theory around this called the cooking hypothesis, arguing that cooked food is the reason Homo erectus, showing up around 1.9 million years ago, had a noticeably smaller gut and a noticeably bigger brain than earlier hominins. Which is a wild thing to owe your entire personality to, a campfire and a lucky squirrel. Why would evolution bother handing you a smaller stomach and a bigger brain unless something had already changed about how you were getting your calories? Chapter 2 is the fire evidence, and this is where anthropologists start throwing academic elbows at each other because when did humans control fire is one of the most stubbornly unresolved questions in the field. The strongest, least disputed evidence comes from Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, where researchers found burned bone fragments and ash residues dated to roughly 1 million years ago, which is currently one of the earliest widely accepted sites for controlled fire use. That's still nearly 1 million years after Wrangham's cooking hypothesis says the brain-gut trade-off should have started, which is either a massive gap in the fossil record or a massive hole in the theory. And honestly, imagine being an academic whose entire career rests on carbonized squirrel bones from 1 million years ago. Incredible use of one wildlife. Before full control, there's a strong case for what researchers call fire scavenging, using naturally occurring wildfires, the kind started by lightning, the way you did at the very start of this video, and just eating whatever got cooked by accident without needing to know how to start or maintain a flame at all. That's the real accident. Nobody invented cooking on purpose the first time. They just noticed that fire leftovers tasted better and didn't make them sick, which is a genuinely low bar, and yet here we are. So if humans weren't reliably making fire yet, how were they using it consistently, enough for it to actually change their biology? Chapter 3 is domestication, meaning the slow shift from we occasionally eat whatever a wildfire cooked for us to we keep a fire alive on purpose because we've realized it's useful. And this transition seems to solidify hard by around 400,000 years ago, based on hearth sites like Qusim Cave in Israel, where archaeologists found a repeatedly used structured hearth with burned bone and flint tools clustered around it, suggesting people were Sitting down for regular, planned, cooked meals, not just opportunistically snacking on fire debris. That's a genuinely huge behavioral leap. It means groups had to keep fire going overnight, feed it, protect it from rain, basically the same emotional labor as keeping a sourdough starter alive, except the stakes are my entire tribe eats tonight instead of I posted about bread on Instagram. And once fire became a fixture, it didn't just cook food, it restructured entire social life. People had to gather around a central point in the dark, which some researchers argue is the origin of structured group storytelling and social bonding, because suddenly you had hours of enforced togetherness with nothing to do but talk, which is either the birth of culture or the world's first extremely awkward mandatory office happy hour. So once fire was a permanent fixture of daily life, what did it actually do to the human body itself? Chapter 4 is the body's response, and this is the part that should genuinely unsettle you a little. Comparing modern humans to our closest ape relatives, our teeth are smaller, our jaw muscles are weaker, our guts are shorter, and our small intestines are proportionally larger relative to our colons, all consistent with a species that stopped needing brute mechanical force and industrial strength fermentation to get calories out of food. A raw food only human diet today, studied in modern populations who eat strictly raw vegan diets, has been associated with lower body weight and, in women, disrupted or absent menstrual cycles because raw plant food alone often can't supply enough usable energy to sustain normal reproductive function, even with modern tools, modern blenders, and modern access to imported produce that Paleolithic humans obviously didn't have. Which means, statistically, you could not survive long-term on a fully raw diet using your current body, the one cooking built, the same way you can't run last year's operating system on hardware that's already been upgraded past supporting it. Cooking didn't just add convenience to human life, it became biologically load-bearing, a requirement, not a bonus feature. So if your body is now functionally dependent on cooked food to operate normally, what does that actually mean for how we define natural eating at all? Chapter 5 is the myth cleanup, because there is a persistent, extremely confident claim floating around pop science and gym bro nutrition circles that Homo erectus or early humans figured out cooking through some kind of clever insight or observation, like a proto-genius squatting by a fire going eureka. That's not remotely what the evidence supports. The current leading model is layered and unglamorous. First, opportunistic eating of food cooked accidentally by natural wildfires for possibly hundreds of thousands of years with zero fire-making skill required at all. Then, controlled use and maintenance of captured natural fire, keeping embers alive intended rather than making new flame. And only much later, true fire starting on demand using friction or percussion methods, which shows up far more clearly and consistently in the archaeological record starting around 400,000 to 300,000 years ago. That means for an enormous stretch of human prehistory, cooking wasn't a skill anyone possessed, it was a resource humans got lucky enough to steal from natural disasters over and over, until eventually stealing it became keeping it, and keeping it became making it themselves. There was no light bulb moment, there was just a really long streak of, well, this is free food and it's not actively killing me, repeated across hundreds of thousands of years until it became instinct. And if the biggest turning point in human evolution was this unglamorous, this accidental, this dumb luck, how many other genius breakthroughs you were taught in school were actually just somebody getting lucky near a fire? Think back to that scorched grassland, the dead animal, the warm little carcass you picked up without really thinking it through. You weren't a genius, you weren't even trying. You were just a hungry, tired creature taking the path of least resistance, exactly like you do every single day now when you reheat leftovers instead of cooking something proper, or order in because the idea of turning on a stove feels like too much effort after a long day. Every time you do that, every single time you take the lazy, convenient, this is already halfway done for me option with food, you are doing the single most human thing it is possible to do. You're not falling short of some ancestral standard of effort and self-sufficiency. You're following the oldest instinct your species has. Find the food that's already been made easier for you, and don't ask too many questions about how it got that way. Somewhere back there, an ancestor of yours ate a squirrel that a lightning strike cooked for them, and it worked out so well biologically, socially, evolutionarily that a few 100,000 years later you exist with a smaller gut, a bigger brain, and a phone in your hand ordering food that someone else cooked for you. Some things really don't change,